Okay, so my topic is, has human activity impacted climate change during the past 50 years? So just to give a little background on climate change, people have been noticing differences in the planet since Manifest Destiny. By that I mean when settlers were traveling west, people were worried about their impact on the environment and how human settlement would impact their surroundings. But during that time, people argued that the Earth has gone through natural temperature shifts, like for instance the Ice Age, and yeah. But that changed during the 60s and 70s, and people thought that human emissions and greenhouse gases were the main cause. And during this time, that's when a lot of pollutants were going into the air by bigger companies, and so a lot of environmental activists, such as Rachel Carson, she wrote Silent Spring, fought for protection of the environment, and that's when Earth Day was established. So greenhouse gases absorb and emit energy into the atmosphere, for example carbon dioxide. So when levels of greenhouse gases rise, it causes the temperatures to rise in the lower atmosphere of the planet. And these can be natural or man-made. So cars emit greenhouse gases, or stuff like cows emit greenhouse gases because they have something in their stomach, and so yeah. So this is just a little explanation of the greenhouse effect. And so it says when some infrared radiation passes through the atmosphere, most is absorbed and readmitted in all directions. Oh shoot. Okay. The effect is to warm the Earth's surface and the lower atmosphere. So that's what happens. So one of my sides is environmental skepticism, and so these are people who don't believe that climate change is as big a deal as it's made out to be, or they just don't believe that it's happening at all. And so some people argue that that people make the argument that there are only a certain amount of time before the planet is permanently damaged. For example, some people say that when they have 20 years left until the world is going to end, but this has been said over a long amount of time, and yet the world has not ended. So yeah. And then a group that would be classified as environmental skeptics are those who reject all evidence of climate change. So they just deny that it's happening, or they just say that it's natural and can't be stopped. Some people believe that the political agenda is a factor into it. So people think that politicians created this idea of climate change in order to create these two sides. And some people confuse climate with weather. So for example, climate is a long-term change, and weather is what's happening right now. So if someone were to say that it's really cold outside, so climate change isn't real, they're confusing weather with climate. Yeah. So another side of mine that goes with environmental skepticism, that goes against environmental skepticism, is how capitalism engages with climate change. So some people think that the reason why we are facing such problems right now is because of our economy, I guess. And so by this I mean bigger companies have no regard for how they're impacting society, and some of the wealthier population is more impactful than the, I guess, not as wealthy. And then, so people have been concerned about climate change from as far back as 150 years ago, as I said earlier. So, for example, an explorist, John Wesley Powell, he traveled through the Colorado River when the West was first being discovered, I guess. And he brought back to the government at that time that he was worried when humans would settle over there that it would be like destroyed. And so here's a little like graph to show how the wealthy impact the climate by CO2 emissions. So on the top it says like the richest 10% responsible for almost half of total lifestyle consumption emissions. And then this is like the poor 50%, and they're only responsible for around 10% of the total lifestyle consumption emissions. So climate change is reflected in pop culture through many ways. And so because it's felt everywhere, it's really shown in like stuff like music or fashion or TV shows. So for example, this song, Don't Go to the Water by Johnny Cash, it tells the story about him and his son, and they go fishing in this like river, and his son asks if he can eat a fish, but Cash is like, no, I don't know if it's safe, you know, we can't trust the environment anymore because, you know, it's so polluted. And it's also reflected in the media. There's a lot of shows such as like Our Planet or Planet Earth, sorry, I forgot, that show our environment and how climate change is being affected. And then I have this short video.
Saving the polar regions isn't a question of what can we do, it's can we do it in time. What we do in the next 10 years will determine the next 1,000. No generation before us has ever been faced with a challenge on such a planetary scale, or such an immense opportunity. For this is much bigger than ensuring polar bears and walrus have a place on our planet. This is about creating the world we ourselves want to live in. We are, of course, talking about climate change, caused by the greenhouse gases we've released into our atmosphere. 2/3 of these are caused by the burning of fossil fuels in homes, power stations, by industry, and in vehicles. So that means a planet-sized solution is already within reach. And it boils down to 2 words: clean energy.
Okay, that just goes into about how our energy use impacts climate change. Okay, so environmental skeptics deny the evidence, but I feel like that's not really smart because there is such clear signs of a before and after. So, for example, this is a lake in Chile, and it shows, this is 5 years apart. This is a severe like drought that happened, and this affects everything around it. So like basically the town that has been around this like called Lake Aquilo has their economy has suffered because a lot of people go and visit, and because people aren't visiting, it impacts their revenue, and so their economy has been impacted by that. But not just stuff like that, but there's also been more change on a global scale. And so I have this website that NASA has, and it shows a difference from a time perspective. So for example, if I wanted to show how sea ice has changed, so it shows from 1979 to 2018, and as I like slide the little slider, it shows how much that has changed since that point. And although it doesn't seem like a big difference, if you look at the end from 2018 to now, from 1979, there's like a big difference. And this one I feel like is really impactful because you look at the global temperature, and here it has like a scale, and this is from 1884, and as you drag this along, it doesn't seem to be changing that much, but as you can tell, like there's a huge change, and this is like insane if you think about it, how much like the earth and the climate has changed. This is the carbon dioxide levels. 1 second, it's loading. Okay, we'll just skip that one. And then this is sea level, and so by this it means if some of the ice caps melted completely, the areas that in red would be completely underwater, and so like all that land right there would be underwater. So my thoughts on this is that I think that human impact has impacted this society. Oh my gosh, has impacted climate change immensely. So I do think that there are greenhouse gases that are natural, and there are some factors that go into that are natural. But I feel like human society has changed the world for the worse. And this is because of different stuff like overpopulation, reckless environmental practices, and other entities which contribute and cause damage. So I feel that it is irrational to deny climate change because there are so many signs of it around us. My solution would be to change the way we look at our society. So I don't think that there's one solution that can be made, that there's one key change, but I feel that all of us, if we all were to change little habits that we have in our day, it would make a difference. So if we look back, if we look at our planet, there are so many things that could be fixed and could be like helped. So like, for example, there's so much plastic in the sea, and like there's so much air pollution, and there's limited amount of fossil fuels, but we could change that, and we can do little small changes that could help. So like, for example, carpooling to school would help save gas, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but in the long run, if like enough people put the effort in, it would help. And stuff like reusable plastics, like using Tupperware and not using like Ziploc bags every day, or supporting eco-friendly companies, or like a change in diet. I think that all of this could help the planet for the better. And even though it doesn't seem that each individual person doesn't have that much of an impact, if every single one of us puts in the effort to change, I feel that we could, stop this harm that's happening to the planet. And the goal of it all is to reduce our carbon footprint. And here's my works cited.